I welcome Amulya Vishwanath, ma'am, for this podcast. This is a kind of a podcast where I'm not doing with an AI scientist who does the job of building some AI bots or an AI based product, but I'm with a person who helps in marketing it. And probably there is a myth behind building it and marketing it also because everybody has a share in the same old $1 trillion company, but nobody knows what's the share that they need to be fetching towards. That means what should be my contribution for grabbing that big chunk of the share in that market. And trust me, there are very skewed understanding of, okay, this is what AI was. But I think probably after this podcast, you might have to change your mindset behind building some AI based product. It's also about minting money, even it's for the social good. At the end, it's all about minting money. And also, she's not a programmer, but she has that fundamental understanding of what should be the fundamental criteria in marketing AI based products. So right now I'm with Amulya Vishwanath, telling myself and teaching myself what is it to be a product marketeer for an AI based product. So thank you, ma'am. It means a lot to me for this podcast.
My pleasure.
Yes. So let's just understand the fundamental principles of what you understood as an engineer, because most of the time engineering is not just about architecting only solution, but it's also giving the world a fundamental understanding that, hey, this is what the product is all about. So I just want your view of fundamental understanding on engineering something as a product, because you're now into product marketing. So let's just start demystifying this point now.
Absolutely. So my background is in electronics and communication engineering. I went to BNMIT in our very own Banshankari, Bangalore. And back then, and this is way back, about 11 years ago. So long time ago, when AI wasn't really a commercial thing, or machine learning and data science, some concepts of it really existed in some aspect with a lot of research teams in universities, but not necessarily full-fledged commercial products back then, right? So back then, one of my lecturers, when I was looking for our final year project, said, take a look at this IEEE paper that's on digital image compression and decompression for, like using artificial neural networks. And I got intrigued reading at the abstract, just the abstract. And I was the project lead for our project team. You understand how it works with final year projects, right? So I really loved it. But the sad thing back then was it was a course elective, right? I believe it's in 7th semester where you can choose artificial neural networks as an elective, but we never had a lecturer or a professor cover that course. So it was hard to really just apply skills and knowledge right away from book to hearing like lecturing notes to just taking it to a project, right? So there was a lot of things we had to do as a team of students that too. So we went with first Googling. Back then, there was no Udacity, no Coursera. None of these platforms existed to help us understand what is artificial intelligence, what are some of the fundamentals of it, machine learning, how do I get started? No nano degrees, basically, back then, right? It's really a couple of textbooks, but it was more focused on image processing back then than artificial intelligence or artificial neural networks in that sense. So we started out with really Googling what is an artificial neural network. And if you look at the simple definition of it, it correlates so well to how our human neuron works, right? And that was the most fascinating part, where you start with just looking at a neuron, the nucleus gets activated through, and sending signals through the dendrites. And oh my God, that's a simple concept. And imagine applying those fundamentals into an artificial neural network. So basically, an artificial neural network is nothing but, like a simulation of what an actual human neuron does. So that's pretty exciting already. For those who love engineering and biology, I think it's a sweet spot, right, to apply direct analogy. So that's how we started Googling everything, but really Google helped at some point, right? So understanding the fundamentals to understanding, okay, what is back propagation algorithm? What, like what is an artificial neural network? How do we implement it? And the sad thing back then was that we didn't have access to GPUs back then. And really none of these companies, even Xilinx or Intel FPGAs or Ultra FPGAs back then really spoke about how do you implement a simple neural network on their platform, right? It was still a lot in the research phase, like I said. So a student sitting in Bangalore, how are we going to do it, right? So we had to figure out a lot of things, read a lot of papers, really rely on IEEE and just google.com and understand, okay, what are the fundamentals? How do we start implementing it? So we went through like a lot of MATLAB programming and understanding, okay, and it's a simple network, right? 4-to-1 network implementation was hard back then. But now, today, I see so many emerging professional students who are just building a really cool commercializable application while they're in college or right when they're getting out of college. That is fantastic. That's amazing. But back then, it was different. So really, I had to do a lot of self-studying, understand the fundamentals, and really go talk to our professors. But there was no pointed textbook or online resource to go and learn everything in one place. So for all the students and developers today who have access to many, many resources to learn about any technology, whether it's bioinformatics or self-driving technologies or IoT, embedded systems, oh my God, you guys are lucky. So congratulations.
Yeah, I'm lucky that I'm born in this era where amazing scientists have given out their insights for the world. Because even when you think of a greatest philosopher like Noam Chomsky or any other person who is there in the world who has contributed a lot philosophically and mathematically for the world of AI, I think probably there's a fundamental understanding of brain which is yet to be demystified. And yet there is a neural network which is trying to compete with a human level intelligence. So I want to understand this from your side because you were all of a sudden thrown to the world which has AI jargons filled, but you were an DSP engineer. You still fiddle around with the C code, the embedded C code. Verilog most probably you should have had fiddled around with the Verilog or the VHDL part of this embedded world. So I want to know, what was your first experience when you were thrown into this world of AI? Because a lot of times when I see that, an op-amp can be compared to a neural network. Many books have given a lot of analogy using that. And I, in my webinars, also try to make it more hardware oriented than the software oriented part of it. So I want to understand, what was your fundamental myth and the fact that really amazed you when you just had a transition from one industry to the other? Because you were a DSP engineer who was a part of the machines which went behind the same old neural network and edge computing probably. But what was your understanding that really shook your mindset and say, hey, AI is next big thing, but what I did was a part of it? So what was that all about when you had that fundamental understanding of the market?
Yeah. So really, when I was back in my undergrad, right, or bachelor's, I was more focused on FPGA programming. And to your point, yes, Verilog, VHDL, that used to be my semester to semester coursework, where I enjoyed VHDL more than Verilog, to be honest. But any hardware programmer or student understands this, that you have to go through that rigorous training of VHDL and Verilog programming, right? And also our university back then only had access to Xilinx FPGAs. So my world pretty much revolved around FPGA programming for the longest time. But once I got out of my undergrad and I worked for HCL Technologies for about a year as a software developer, which was completely different from what I had done previously and what I'd studied, which is why it just made me realize more and more that I had a heart and place for hardware and software, that I can, like fuse rather than just sitting and building applications for banking, for example, right? Which is why I decided to come to the US to do my master's in electrical engineering from University of Minnesota Twin Cities. So I left HCL Technologies, I came here, but my mind was blown by the first fact that as a student in a public research university here in the US, you not only get to take courses that are core to your curriculum, which is electrical engineering. But if you want to learn, you can always take a course in psychology, or you can take a course in biomedical engineering, though you are an electrical engineering graduate. So that amount of flexibility to really fuse your knowledge and understanding of different concepts. And today, if you look at a lot of AI experts, whether they are in research or in the industry, they don't come with AI, masters in AI or bachelors in AI. They have either taken one of these technical courses, or they haven't even taken any of these technical courses or programs, but still they come with like background in psychology or background even in like, Marcoms. Everybody has an interest in learning how AI can impact the world in a positive way, right? So everybody's curious, everybody wants their share and want to contribute to it. So navigating from my undergrad and getting into my master's program, I took a bunch of courses from like circuits and biology, where you can understand the circuits aspect, but also connected to biology. And many of the homeworks were like, it would blow your mind. It would look simple, but you had to understand the core fundamentals about how a neural network works, but at the same time, how does a circuit works, and the nitty-gritty details of all things biology. So imagine somebody coming with engineering background and having to do all of this in 2.5 months, right? So it's pretty exciting. So my mind was blown the moment I came here to the US and had the opportunity to take these different, fusion courses, I would call, that gave me a completely different perspective than what I had previously. So I would encourage any students or professionals who are considering master's programs to really look at adding diversity in terms of the courses that they take, because that's when you become successful. You get to think from a different perspective than just one straight mind, where you're just thinking, okay, I'm a hardware engineer, I'm going to do this. I'm a software engineer, I'm going to do this. Versus, let's say, for example, you do a couple of courses that are more focused on psychology, and you're taking your core courses in computer architecture and artificial intelligence or GPU programming and such. Imagine the fusion of those things, because it becomes super, super important, especially when you're designing systems that have to be ethical, unbiased. So these are concepts that core engineering doesn't really teach you yet, right? In any of the programs. They have these adjunct faculty coming from different branches teaching you these things. So have a worldwide or an open mindset, and try to be successful at a global scale, which means have a network with experts and students that understand different set of things. So that's kind of how I started. So really getting that global mindset from speaking to different people at the university, learning about different courses that were available, to actually seeing where my heart fits in and where my passion is, right? So that's how I navigated from having electrical or electronics engineering background in my undergrad or bachelor's, and then becoming a software developer to not even liking it, and then coming back to electrical engineering master's program. But it was amazing for me to really fuse the technology side of things with the business side of things, which is the minor that I did in management of technology. So that really helped me propel my career, because I could not only understand the hardware and software side of things and also speak about it in interviews, but I could also talk about the business side of things, right? Today, companies don't just want to know that you have many projects on GitHub. Also, so think about it, right? So you have fundamental understanding of programming. You're an awesome C++ or a Java programmer or Python, whatnot. But if you cannot apply skills to actually thinking big picture, where I know I'm coding a component, but where does it fit in a product or an application, right? If you don't know, and if you cannot talk about it, you're not going to be a successful all-rounder programmer or a developer or just an expert in general, right? So think about it in that sense. So when you're approaching a company or a university, think about where you really want to contribute your knowledge. If you have awesome computer vision skills and you want to contribute into, let's say, wildfire detection around the globe, you have a purpose. So have that purpose and know what application or what product you will be helping or enabling. Don't just think about sub-component or component level where you're like, oh, this is just my component, I'm just going to do design verification for this, or I'm just going to be programming, or like in general, running code for a specific thing or testing it. Think about the big picture, the product, where it fits in, the company portfolio. And once you're able to not just talk technically, but also talk about, the business impact your product is going to make, that just makes you way more successful in, any company that you go to, if that helps. And I can talk more about how I made that switch, but go ahead with your other questions.
Yeah, because I want to understand what, according to you, is still the biggest open-ended problem statement. Because a lot of times, a marketeer's view on, let's say, a balance sheet-based valuation probably might not give that much of insight, because venture capitalists price the business. They don't see the valuation of it. If it's like valuated for 6 billion, they're ready to give 12 billion, and they're ready to just grab that piece of dollar which might get minted over a course of time. So I wanted to understand, like, what according to you is still the open-ended problem statement, which is still yet to be solved from the AI market, or else from an engineer's perspective. Let it be architecting a solution to the dumbest thing that can be built using an AI. What is that all about?
Yeah, so think about it this way, right? So most of the developers are excited and are thrilled to learn about AI in general. But most of the companies, they say they do AI, but they aren't really doing AI that has the highest accuracy or has the highest performance and, like whatnot, right? Depending on the application, for example. So it's super important to first understand what are the developer needs, which is why you want to build products that are more about democratizing AI, that is more friendlier to developers. And if you think about it, a lot of the companies have their own developer ecosystem. So it's not about just getting your next big customer name, in the bag, but it's about creating that ecosystem, enabling not one developers or 10 developers, but enabling thousands to millions of developers. So that's what's going to be successful. And the good or bad thing about developers is that they don't like marketing. So marketing to developers never really works. You have to speak to their passion. You have to understand their problem statement. So really, developers, if you talk to worldwide developers, their problem statement is, how can I make my AI accurate? That's one of the things. The other thing is that, how can I get started with AI? Because a lot of professionals have been in different streams of engineering or any other roles who want to learn about ML, data science, and AI. So how do we enable them? So think of it as twofold. One is educating and providing the right resources to get started with AI. And then the second thing is, don't market to developers. They don't need marketing. Really, when I say product marketing, I'm not marketing to developers by calling them on the phone or sending them an email telling, hey, this is free, that's free, and whatnot. I'm really talking to them through technical blogs, for instance, or technical webinars, for example, white papers. We have a group of engineers who are building technical blogs to really help them break down concepts, to understand simple things about, like, how do I set up my Jupyter notebook? How do I get started with Kubernetes? How do I go beyond, taking all of these components and building my AI app or service, right? So talking to them in developer language. So that is super important, if that makes sense. And the other thing is education, right? Which is why a lot of companies and in general, nonprofit organizations offer many educational trainings today across the globe, from whether it's India to US to emerging countries, Africa as a whole continent. I mean, there are a lot of resources today, and I'm personally jealous because I never had access to a lot of these resources, which is why, I've also been active on Coursera and looking at what are some of the awesome courses? And even NVIDIA has Deep Learning Institute, and there are a lot of self-paced courses. It's just a browser click away for anybody who wants to get started with AI today. So that's the best thing.
Yeah, because having that fundamental understanding of what should be marketed is something which is cool. Because a lot of times we have that gap between a developer and a marketeer. Leaving that, because you were there from an engineering background and you had a sudden shift, and it's a new dimension that you were supposed to deal with. So I wanted to understand, what is that fundamental theory of everything in marketing and AI product, and also the fundamental challenges in understanding what was to be marketed? You told that, but like, I wanted to know, what was your understanding for the product? Because a lot of times I always say that you might develop a $1 billion product, but until and unless it's understood by an MBA, it's going to be a white paper or a patent, which is going to be held down by some other guy. So I wanted to understand, what was your fundamental challenges that you faced when you were understanding an AI-based product as a marketeer, product marketeer, not you're a kind of an engineer who can market a stuff. So I just wanted to understand that.
Yes. So I actually wanted to take a step back and talk about how I actually made the career transition from being a signal processing engineer to the AI side of things, right? So after I completed my master's program, I got into a company as a signal processing engineer, and I was working on MATLAB and Simulink-based designs for Department of Defense projects. So that was my world for a long time. And immediately I realized that I enjoy the customer interactions. I enjoy the discussions that I have with customers and partners. And I really enjoyed communicating the benefits of the core technology that I was building, because I had the insights. I would work with a lot of internal teams and really understand what are the customer needs, right? You have to understand your customer pain points to even be able to face them to begin with. And customer meetings are never easy. It's pretty brutal, and you'll realize what I am talking about as you start working in your first company and next company, and as you advance your years of experience. Which is when Intel reached out to me for a signal processing product marketer's role. So in this role, you have to be able to understand the underlying technologies like signal processing, right? Like understanding about everything related to MATLAB, Simulink, but also DSP Builder was a tool back then, and it still is a tool, but when I was working, was a developer tool that had to be marketed to developers. So coming with the signal processing engineering background, it was helpful for me to just take those transferable skills. But now I had to flex new muscles in terms of understanding, wait, what is product marketing? I had to start myself. Today, if you Google product marketing, you'll find a lot of resources. But back then, not a lot of resources and not a lot of jobs as well in product marketing. But today it's one of the hottest jobs. And especially a lot of AI companies want to hire product marketers who are able to communicate all the technical benefits and also speak on the business side of things. So a lot of options here. So you don't necessarily have to think about, I have to be an ML engineer. If you love talking to customers, if you love talking to partners, you still love and want to keep your technology experience side of things, product marketing or product management is a great job function to explore. But that's it. So that's how I came into the product marketing world. So my daily day-to-day routine really looked like working with a lot of product managers and DSP engineers who were in UK. So that was my world for the longest time. So you're never going away, even if you're in marketing, you're never going away from the product team, engineering team, the researcher team. They're all right there. You are going to work with them much more closely than being an engineer working on, let's say, a small component of the whole project. So it just gives you visibility into all the pieces that different product engineers are working with, to what the product manager is building in terms of the features, to understanding those features and transforming those technical benefits into business benefits. So that's really the hard muscle that I had to flex and kind of mold my mind into, okay, I understand these features, but now I need to communicate this to the different signal processing companies. How do you do that, right? So your language changes. Let's say, for example, you have an engineer who has built a component that is fast by 9x, right? Speed up by 9x. You have to communicate this to customers. Customer loves hearing, hey, we have achieved 9x speed than our previous generations, or we are better by X factor than our competitors. These are the words that they want to hear. But beyond that, they also want to hear about how cheaper is my solution now. You're saying it's 9x faster, but does it mean that I have to now buy less hardware but still build a massive application? So you have to address those aspects of it, which was eye-opening for me, especially coming with the engineering background. And now you had to speak this language, but you had to understand everything technically. So for anybody who's curious about product marketing in technology companies, it's pretty straightforward. You have to be passionate about a specific technology. And then once you look at that technology, you have to frame the business objectives of the company. How can I align my passion for this technology and make it impactful at the revenue level, right? For just like what you mentioned, minting money, how can you contribute your passion and the technology that you're working on to the final business objectives? So think of it that way. And there are many ways you can contribute. So product marketing is one of those job functions that gives you full 360-degree visibility into how a product is being built, and you get to work with the top and amazing engineers overall.
Yeah, you are true actually, because a lot of times we speak a lot of jargons, but I want your view, because how much do you think is a fact and the myth when we are still developing? Because we talk ML ops, AI ops, DevOps is something which was cool for a course of time. But what do you feel as a marketer when you hear about these jargons? Because let's not go a little outwards of this minting money, but what do you feel about engineering aspect? Because you are a marketer and you are supposed to be sending the product out at a very fast pace. Like whatever might be the developer, but you need to see the product in front of you. So I just want to understand, what do you feel about the jargons which are coming up right now in the world of AI? Like your understanding, nothing much.
So a lot of people talk about.
I want you to actually address in terms of how much is the hype and how much is the hope when you hear about these things. That's my question actually.
Okay, so before we jump there, I wanted to set some level here, right? So it's super important to understand that marketing AI is important, but also even before marketing AI, educating people and customers and partners in general is even more important. Because a lot of companies are still more traditional, and while they can save, let's say, with automation by like 50x of whatever they're doing today, they are still a bit hesitant because they don't know where to start, which is where the educational piece comes into picture. So even before you market and say that, hey, we have the best solution for, let's say, industrial automation, take a step back, educate these traditional companies about why automation is needed, why is it important, and what is the ROI at the end of the day, right? And to your point about hype or hope, it's AI field is evolving, right? A lot of these technologies, if you think about it, long ago, we didn't know that a device like an Alexa or a Google Assistant or a Siri would exist to assist us with mundane tasks on a daily basis. But today, it's just become a daily part of our life, right? We ask Alexa to order our next commodity on Amazon.com, or Google Assistant to schedule our next meeting and such. So it's just, like, it's possible, but it's going to take time, and the technologies are going to evolve. And even when the first version of the voice assistants came in, they had a limited set of functionalities or features. But today, they are using hardcore AI to understand and personalize experiences or even your shopping experience, for example, or maybe, for example, take Spotify, right? They're not just showing songs because they have to. They understand the type of music that you're listening to and personalize it for you, which is where, if you think about it, under the hood, there are recommender systems. Those are the ones powering up your personal experience with Spotify. So there are a lot of technologies that are coming together, and it's just going to be an incredibly technology rich world, more and more that you think about it, whether it's AI for wildfire detection, or maybe COVID cough detection, or it could be let's say smart analytics inside a hospital to make sure that patients are assisted right away, or even just in general personalizing experiences with recommender systems, for example, or making Alexa and similar voice assistants smarter with conversational AI, right? So everything is going to get faster, everything is going to become more and more prominent. So it's super important to have patience first, have an understanding of the fundamentals. A lot of courses and a lot of researchers are publishing their work today. So that's the best thing. You have access to just ping the best top researcher on Twitter or on LinkedIn and just pick their brain, right? That's the best thing today. You can learn directly from these experts. And the hype part, like I said, a lot of companies, while they are focused on educating their customers and partners, and they're also interested in making sure they have a developer community to fuel innovation. But there are also other communities who are, well, actually, I take back the word communities, startups or companies in general, who they're not doing that much of AI. They're probably using AI automation under the hood, which is built by another partner or another vendor, and they call it an AI-based service. That's really not the type of AI you want, because you're basically working or dealing with a black box, or like you just don't know what's under the hood. And when you don't know what's under the hood, there's no AI transparency, and which complicates a lot of things with a lot of factors we're talking about today, right? Which is about, is it ethical enough? Is it doing the right thing that we want it to be? And today it might be for one use case, but tomorrow it'll be for 3 or 10 more use cases. Will that same box of components and algorithms put together be able to scale and make decisions at that level? So it's really important to have patience. And there is some level of hype, like I said, with some of these companies where they don't even know that they're doing AI and what part of AI, but they still highlight it. So I would recommend, if you want to really understand the credibility of a company, go and see what their developers are talking about. Go to their developer forums and understand what are some of the questions they're posting about. Are they having specific challenges, and how is the company addressing it? And you'll get to know the credibility of that company in terms of their understanding about AI fundamentals to complex questions that their developers are asking. So really, the credibility of an AI-centric company can be judged by the developers in their ecosystem. And if they don't have one, and if you just look at the forums, you'll get a better idea. So I would say that if you want to be successful, whether you're representing a company or yourself as an AI enthusiast, just go look at the developer community for these companies. And yeah, that's if you want to learn more about technical product marketing and what does it look like on a day-to-day basis, I'll be sharing resources on what product marketing is in technology companies, and also how to interview as a product marketer or how to break into the product marketing field.
Today, I'm really proud of doing a podcast with you, because I'll show you what, you just gave a big slap to the guys who just said everything is in hype in the world of AI. Because a lot of times when people really don't understand the fact that there's a complex understanding that a developer needs to go behind building such kind of a black box like a neural network, which we are trying to architect. And I think this was the best answer that anybody can hear. I think thank you so much, ma'am, for giving me this podcast. It means a lot. And thank you for such bright insights about marketing an AI-based product, but actually you talk a little more technical beyond that also. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for hosting this podcast. And I wish you the very best in your career and profession in general.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.